If you've watched the show, then you might think that the manosphere is purely to blame for Katie's death, or you might think that Jamie planned the murder in advance. But things are not always what they seem, especially not at first. This is why I believe two of the main driving factors behind Jamie's actions were poor emotional management and a lack of love. That being said, you might be thinking that Eddie Miller, Jamie's dad, obviously loved his son. And while I agree, this is exactly what I mean by things aren't always what they seem. Because even though it's clear Eddie loved him, it's not as clear that Jamie always perceived that to be true. Like Brioni, the clinical psychologist in episode 3 said,
"What you think is more important to me than what is true."
More on that later. For now, I want to explain how poor emotional management can lead to an outburst of this sort. This is critical to understanding why Jamie did what he did, but if you want to skip ahead to my analysis of the show, then skip to this timestamp. Or go to the chapter I've titled How Jamie Acts. Your negative emotions are a cry for help. They hurt so much because they need your attention. They need your care. And doing anything other than that just suppresses them and gives them time to fester. The way I like to think about it is that your emotions are like little kids. Each one has a message to get to you, but the only way they can deliver you that message is if you give them attention. If, on the other hand, you either ignore, suppress, or demonize them, then they'll just keep building in intensity until you do notice them. This is the same thing a kid does when they have something they want to communicate to you, but for some reason can't. They cry, they throw tantrums, they do anything they can to make you see them and hear them. Of course, you can ignore them further or punish them for acting out without you first trying to listen to them and understand why they're acting the way they're acting. But that just means that next time they'll act out even more. Either that or they'll internalize their emotions and stop talking to you and trusting you as a parent. Because after multiple attempts, you've showed and proved to them that they don't matter enough for you to slow down and give them the attention and compassion that they so desperately need. This is the same thing with our emotions. If we don't pay attention to them early on, we will eventually do one of three things. One, will hit a breaking point and explode as our emotions find a way to escape. Two, will experience numbness and dissociation as our emotions will no longer feel our bodies are a safe place for them to be expressed. Or three, will be consumed by negative emotion, which is when you become a, quote, angry person, jealous person, sad person, anxious person, etc. And the ramifications of this are huge because it means that we're past the point of being able to healthily manage our emotions, and instead we've entered the very dangerous territory where our emotions manage us. So now that you have a basic understanding of how emotions work, let's take a look at how this played out in the show. For the rest of the video, I'll be analyzing Jamie's problematic beliefs and behaviors and where they come from. As I'm doing this, keep in mind that although I'm explaining them individually, they all actually overlap and bleed into each other. Okay, so there's 5 beliefs and behaviors that I want to go over in this section. The first and most obvious one is that Jamie sees women as objects and believes they should only have supporting roles. For Jamie, women exist only to lift men up and make them feel better. This becomes obvious when we realize that he killed Katie simply because she rejected him. But even just his reasoning behind asking her out is telling.
Everyone was calling her slag, or flat or whatever, so I thought when she was like that weak, she might like me.
The fact that he says she's weak just because some boys were making fun of her for being flat shows that he believes that physical appearance determines a person's overall worth. For Jamie, this is especially true when it comes to women, and in fact, it seems he thinks that a woman's worth is wholly determined by men's opinion of her. If she's attractive, popular, and desirable, then she's high value. If not, she's weak and worthless, or maybe only worthy to the extent that she can make an equally weak man feel better about himself. As further confirmation that Jamie believes women only exist to support men rather than to hold them accountable or to simply be themselves, he questions Brioni twice for not comforting him, which goes against his expectation that a woman's job is to make him and men in general feel better. This also ties into his next behavioral pattern, which I'll reveal soon. His worldview continues to be subverted by Brioni when she signals a male officer who rushes to her aid away. Jamie quickly catches on and becomes more upset, revealing that he disagrees with women ever being in control or in positions of power, especially if it's with respect to men. Some of the psychologists I came across during my research also suggest that since he constantly makes references to how the previous male psychologist was better and asked easier questions, he, one, is primed to feel distrustful, and or two, automatically assumes that men do a better job, but I think it could also mean that she's just asking better questions that make him feel uncomfortable because she's actually successfully peeling back layers, poking at his pain, and getting to the root of the issue.
I'm not good at much, but I'm really good at getting out of pain.
How'd you do that then?
Oh, headaches, hurt my leg, funny tummy. So I feel dizzy, can I sit down? That sort of thing.
Even though he says he doesn't, Jamie is used to lying, deceiving, and manipulating. He gets enjoyment out of it, and you could even say he's proud of it.
It's clever, don't you think?
Sadly, lying is probably the only thing that makes him feel better about himself, since we know that he has low self-esteem and he doesn't think he's good at much. This is why, even though he didn't really like her, he asked Katie out to manipulate and use her to raise his worth as a man in the eyes of other men. And he did so when he perceived her to be most vulnerable.
Her weakness made her more gettable, was your theory?
Yeah.
In addition, like I said in my last point, the fact that he pleads with Brioni to comfort him when he finds himself in a vulnerable position shows that he normalizes lying and being lied to, as long as he ends up feeling better as a result. Finally, I think it's also important to realize that even though it isn't immediately obvious, Jamie lied throughout the first episode, so he effectively manipulated us as the viewers too.
You do not tell me when to sit down! You do not control what I fucking... Look at me now!
Jamie loves being in a position of power, which is most obvious throughout his interactions with Brioni, as he repeatedly tries to intimidate her and weaponizes fear to control the situation. For example, when he makes her flinch, yells at her, and repeatedly stands up as she remains seated. This is also what he tried to do with Katie the night he murdered her. He was trying to regain control from a girl he felt had taken it away from him.
I had a knife. She was scared, but I didn't do that. I could have touched any part of her body I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I didn't.
He wanted, or even needed to, feel power over her simply because she had rejected him. It's also equally important to note that when he doesn't want to deal with a situation anymore, especially when it involves a woman, he uses anger to end it and create distance. Interestingly, he's not the one to leave though. Instead, he makes the other person feel fear so that they're the ones to distance themselves. So even though he might be the one to initially want distance, he creates it without making himself look weak or vulnerable, which means he remains in control. This is kind of like playing chicken. Whoever steps out of the way first is seen as weaker and is literally the loser.
7 times all over. My chest, neck, thigh.
The murder, which was a crime of passion, is the first and biggest indication that Jamie is reactive and has a hard time managing his emotions. But he also consistently reacts with anger and experiences outbursts in other situations. For example, when he feels cornered or when he feels he's no longer in control.
No, fuck off! I didn't fucking say that! You fucking putting words in my mouth!
Interestingly though, once he's removed through his pain, he's able to calm himself down and be a nice, polite kid again.
I shouted. I'm sorry.
This is kind of like how an injured animal acts. They lash out because their injury makes them feel vulnerable, even though normally they might be pretty docile. This is also evidence of the fact that when he lashes out, it's not even necessarily conscious, but rather it's a loss of control, which is a result of what I explained in the second part of this video. Finally, a more subtle sign that he's unable to self-regulate is again given when he, on 2 occasions, indirectly asks Brioni to comfort him, to lie to him and tell him that his dad isn't ashamed of him and that he isn't ugly just so that he can feel better. This shows that even though on the surface it might not look that significant, the possibility of having ashamed his dad at soccer and probably on other occasions is a deep wound that he isn't able to process on his own. This is why he needs someone else to hold his hand through it. And when they don't, he's forced to confront the pain himself, which ultimately makes him lash out.
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. I do think they're right about that, though.
Jamie doesn't seem to actually think for himself or form his own opinion in a variety of topics. He's just a chameleon that tries to fit in by upholding his peers' and society's expectations without questioning whether he actually agrees with them or not. This is why he tends to justify his actions by citing what other people, usually those in the majority or higher up in the hierarchy, do or do not think, say, or do. For example, when Brioni asks him if he wants a girlfriend, he says,
"Yeah, who doesn't?"
It's also exactly for this reason that his first instinct was to lie to Brioni about his past sexual experiences. But the reason he tries so hard to fit in is ironically precisely because he doesn't. He doesn't like PE, he's bad at soccer, and he doesn't do well with girls, all of which are traditionally considered manly things. This causes anger and frustration within him, which he can't take out on guys, so he takes it out on those he deems to be weaker and even more inferior, women. I also wanted to mention in this section that the tragic thing is that Jamie is good at some things, drawing for instance. But since society and especially his dad doesn't seem to see the value in this, Jamie doesn't either. This is why, again, it doesn't matter what's actually true, but rather what Jamie experiences and believes to be true. Ultimately, this, not the objective truth, is what will inform his actions and decisions as it did on the night he killed Katie. Okay, so while I could keep listing off more of Jamie's problematic beliefs and behaviors, these were the major ones I wanted to cover. So now it's time to look at why he believes and acts the way he does. The thing is, these things don't come out of nowhere, they're learned. So where or who did he learn them from? I'll tell you. But before I do, just as a recap, Jamie exhibits the following problematic beliefs and behaviors. He undervalues women, he lies, deceives, and manipulates, he grapples for power and control, he's unable to self-regulate, and he's highly susceptible and conforming. It would be easy to place the entire blame on the influence the manosphere had on Jamie, but it goes a lot deeper than that. In fact, in total, I've identified 5 crucial aspects of Jamie's life that, when filtered through his personal psychology, resulted not only in the beliefs and behaviors I just finished going over, but also in Katie's murder. The first is that, as a result of the environment he's grown up in, Jamie has normalized some pretty negative habits, attitudes, and beliefs.
Give me £20 now. Nah, give me £20 now. Give me £20 now.
What immediately comes to mind is that he's normalized outbursts. In fact, he even thought it was funny when his dad tore a shed down while in a fit of rage. On the flip side, his mom, Manda, doesn't place limits on her husband, and she doesn't feel comfortable being vulnerable in front of him. This is why she hides when she feels the need to cry and even covers her mouth in an attempt to do so as quietly as possible. This teaches Jamie, 1, that it's not okay to openly show your emotions, and 2, that a woman has to hide how she feels, who she is, and how she thinks, just so that man can be more comfortable. This lack of emotional vulnerability is further emphasized in the car scene, after Jamie admits that he wants to change his plea.
Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna plead guilty.
Instead of openly showing their emotions, his dad remains silent and his mom and sister deflect and fill the uncomfortable silence by asking him trivial questions like if the food had gotten any better or if he was still in the gym all the time. Also, back to the tearing down of the shed, the fact that his dad can experience such rage shows that he bottles his emotions until he eventually explodes, normalizing not only outbursts but also emotional unavailability and repression in men, which he himself likely learned in childhood given that he was abused as a child.
But when I was his age, my dad used to fucking batter me. Sometimes he'd take the belt to me and he'd fucking whack me, and he'd whack me.
Similar habits and attitudes are further reinforced in Jamie's school, which in episode 2 is revealed to be quite a violent environment both emotionally and physically. Not only this, but many of the students have no respect for authority, and they even seem to believe that there are no and should be no consequences for negative behavior.
Jamie, do it, sir.
Come on, listen to the man.
Oh, shit, he did!
Stop swearing, please.
Which is only to be expected when the teachers don't seem to be able to successfully demand respect or uphold rules and boundaries. Secondly, Jamie harbors some deep insecurities.
Do you think girls are attracted to you?
No. Of course not.
Why, of course not.
Because I'm ugly.
This is likely because he doesn't fit in and he's not popular. In fact, he's bullied at school and on social media. Nevertheless, it's likely that his insecurities also stem from having disappointed his dad in soccer, a traditionally manly thing, and maybe in other things too. Because of this, he cares way too much about what other people think and say about him, both in person and on social media. This is likely why we see him on multiple occasions ask Brioni if he can see what she's written about him, not to mention the fact that at the end of episode 3, we see him grasping for her acceptance and validation.
Don't you even like me a bit? What did you think about me then?
But why would someone who hates women want validation from a woman? I think it's because Jamie doesn't actually hate women. He just desperately needs them to fill the hole left by his insecurities, especially if he considers them to be of high value, as he does Brioni.
You're posh, aren't you?
But when this doesn't happen, he snaps.
Been using that to my van! It was just a laugh. Well, it's not fucking funny, is it? Hey, is it funny? Don't smile, kid, because I'll slap that fucking smile off your face.
Despite seeming extremely patient and calm in episode 1, we learn that, as I've already mentioned, Eddie can actually experience some pretty extreme bouts of anger. We then see how Eddie has the ability to quickly shift from anger to politeness and back in episode 4, which sets the expectation for Jamie as to how to behave in these sort of situations.
Have we done anything wrong? No. No, so we're not moving. We're not moving, man, end of story. Shit.
It's all right.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. I'll clean it up.
Additionally, Manda, which we see take on a submissive role throughout the whole series, doesn't call Eddie out on it. Whether out of expectation or not, she just absorbs and accepts it. This teaches Jamie that women are just pawns who don't have the right to redirect men. They're just there to support them, whether wrong or right, and regardless of how their actions may affect them.
Please, help me out, love, I'm trying.
All right, yeah, we'll all go.
Yeah?
Get the table back.
Hey?
Get the table back.
Okay, yeah.
This may be why the best thing that Jamie could say about his mom was that she can cook a roast. It might be subtle, but this indicates that he sees his mom as purely being in a supporting role, an object that makes his life easier, which is the same way he sees women in general. This compared to how he sees his dad, who he obviously looks up to and admires. Why so much admiration, though? I think it's because he can't seem to be able to find acceptance from any other male figures in his life. At school, he's not popular, and his granddad isn't that present anymore. This, combined with the fact that he sees his dad as manly, means he's extremely dependent on him and constantly needs to feel loved and accepted by him to be able to feel okay. This makes it extremely likely that Jamie feels any sort of disappointment, neglect, or distance between them, any sort of decrease in love and affection really deeply, and possibly even interprets it as abandonment, which is unfortunate because even though he obviously loves him, Eddie's first reaction when Jamie doesn't meet his expectations is usually to distance himself, either through anger or by turning away. Ultimately, this means that even if his dad's initial reaction only lasts a microsecond, Jamie probably repeatedly feels intense rejection from him and blames his dad's negative reactions on his inability to be a man, rather than on his dad's inability to correctly manage his emotions. The key thing to see here is that something doesn't have to be extreme to traumatize, especially when talking about vulnerable populations like children or the mentally ill. This, again, is why when trying to understand another person's inner workings, what's important isn't what objectively happened, but rather how they perceived it. Nevertheless, it is usually possible to process trauma and reframe it in a way that allows you to move on and maybe even see it as a net positive in your life. Unfortunately, since his parents knew nothing of his private, more intimate life, this was probably never going to be an option for Jamie, as they would have likely never picked up on his maladaptations unless something like this happened. And that brings me to my next point, which is that there was a lack of oversight and an overall lack of presence from key figures in Jamie's life.
I'd come home, slam the door straight up the stairs on the computer. I'd see the light on at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'd knock and I'd say, Jamie, come on, son, you've got school tomorrow. And the lights would turn off, but he never said nothing.
This factor comes to light as we listen to the dialogue between his parents in episode 4, and it's further supported by the fact that Eddie was clueless of his online activity until the cops revealed it. In general, it seems Jamie had a lot of alone time, and this, combined with everything else I've talked about in this video, is what ultimately led him to go online to interact and learn from the Manosphere, a community that doesn't necessarily have his best interest in mind, or that is necessarily healthy for someone, especially a teen, to be exposed to. Overall, Adolescence is a powerful show that, at the same time as critiquing the manosphere and toxic masculinity, also demonstrates the importance of learning how to manage your emotions. Because ultimately, by not being able to do so, Jamie only accomplishes the opposite of what he so desperately wants and needs: love and attention. On the other hand, if he learned to healthily manage and process his emotions, he would experience a more satisfying life, better relationships, more confidence and self-esteem, internal worth and validation, and ultimately self-love and inner peace, which are things I actively work to cultivate and teach on this channel. So if that interests you, then subscribe. And if you like this video, then check out the video I'll link in the end card. It explores similar ideas. As for now though, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.